Hey guys, Dagan here from PMCV UK, and as you can tell by the title of this video, I'm here to show you how to buy your first bass guitar amplifier. There's quite a few different variants out there at the moment. Valve amps, solid state amps, modeling amps, some with built-in speakers. Should I buy a head in the cab? I don't know. Hopefully this video will put you on the right path to your first ever bass amp. You guys out there don't know how lucky you are. Probably less than 10 years ago, bass amps were very simple, very heavy, and very loud. Nowadays, lightweight is key. Bass players haven't got to go to the gym every Wednesday to carry their amp up every venue stairs. You can buy something small, portable, lightweight, loud, and versatile for not a lot of money, but there is still variance within that. So let's start with whether you should get a valve amp, a solid state amp, or a modeler. Now there's no right or wrong, best or worst. They're all just slightly different, and I do recommend you coming into a store and trying one for yourself. My word is not gospel, I'm just here for a bit of advice for you. So valve amps, classic design. The way back in the day you used to get things loud that you plugged into and made noise with was to put it through an amp that had valves in, or if you're American, tubes, which are little glass mirrors that stick in to a circuit board and make loudness happen. It's witchcraft essentially, but it's how it worked back in the day. And valves are quite heavy and quite loud. Valve amps, that is. But you do get a nice, sweet, warm sound. And when you turn them up really loud, you get a little bit of grit. Lemmy grit, if you want, but also a nice little bit of grit and compression. But that's old school. New school kind of thing moves into solid state. Solid state originally, don't listen to what everyone says online. Oh, solid state's not as good as valve amps, they sound crap and blah, blah, blah. They sound just as good these days. It's really hard pressed to find a bad sounding solid state bass amp. Perks of solid state, they're lightweight, and you can kind of get them to sound like anything you want if you buy a specific brand. So if you love Ampeg, but you can't afford a big SVT valve amp, the kind of ones that Duff McKagan used to use or whatever, they do a solid state version, which is a lot lighter, a lot cheaper, and a nigh on exact sound. Orange is a great example as well. Orange do the big valve heads, slightly smaller heads, the Terra bass. It's a valve amp, one of the most popular small bass valve amps ever. But they also do the solid state crush range, which tonally, to a beginner's ears, and the crowd's ears to be fair, do sound like lovely, warm, thick, orange sound. I hope that kind of makes sense. So the solid state amps these days are just modern alternatives to valve amps. Valve amps are still great, and if that's in your budget, try the valve amp, try the solid state amp, try them all out. And if you're not really too sure what to get something like a modeling amp. My favorite modeling amp at the minute for beginners is the Fender Rumble LT25, little 25 watt bass amp that, well, what modeling is a digital amplifier that models different kind of amps. So they're all aptly named within these amps. There's Ampegs, there's Gallion-Krugers, there's Oranges, there's Old Marshalls. And you can pick between which ones. They're not going to sound exact, but it'll give you an idea of all the different kind of sounds. And if you're jamming along with records in the house or working on your own thing and you need a specific bass sound, a modeling amp will have it right there. And most of the time, they come with built-in effects, so you haven't got to buy crazy pedals and everything. It's all built in, so you can kind of home the sound that you want, and that's a modeling amp. Next up, a question we get asked quite a lot here at PMT is, do I need a specific bass amp for an active or passive bass? If you don't know what that is, check out my other video on how to buy a bass guitar, or how to choose your first bass guitar, I should say, and I explain the difference between passive and active. Active has an active circuit in, so it's louder. Most amps these days, most bass amps, have a thing called a pad in, which is either a little switch or a button next to the input. And the pad lowers it by a certain amount of decibels, so the active bass comes in a lot hotter because there's a battery in the back than a passive bass. Passive bass, something like a Fender Jazz, active bass like a Stingray style or something with a bit more grit. Most amps do have them in these days, or if there's no switch, at least another input for a low impedance. So don't stress too much about whether your bass amp has to be specific for your active or passive bass. How much wattage do you need? How much wattage do you need to power these 3 4x10 Ashdowns? Wattage is weird. I'm usually a guitar player, and bass amp wattages terrify me just as much as they do you if you're a beginning bass player out there. You can get 800 watt bass amps, and it's like, holy hell, that's gonna take out my entire crowd at the front as a guitar player going like, come on man, don't ruin my gig. I like my guys with my little 50 watt combo at the back. But it's not as intimidating as that seems really. If you're just starting out, you don't need to go crazy, but even the higher wattage bass amps, unless it's a valve amp, do sound good quiet. If it's solid state or a modeling amp, the solid state nature will make it sound good quiet. And that kind of ties into my next point I wanted to go to is gigging. Do I need a little amp for the house or one for gigging? If you get a medium-ish solid state bass amp, 90% of the time it'll come with a DI out. And what that means is for a live situation, well, firstly, it'll sound great in the house because it's high wattage but solid state, nice and quiet. But the DI out on the back will mean it's loud enough to gig with, so you get a bit of air pressed against the back of your legs when you're playing. But the DI out means you can plug it into the mixing desk and it'll come through the PA and through your monitor if you have one on stage. So you haven't got to have these crazy bass rigs to make the crowd hear it anymore. Small amp, great for in the house, great for a bit of stage volume, and that DI out on the back means you can XLR straight into a mixing desk and please your crowd and your guitarist like myself. So with the whole wattage thing, I don't want to scare you into thinking, do I need a big amp? I'm just going to sit and practice at home. I don't know, I'm just kind of laying the groundwork for, you could do this in the future. If you're thinking about it in the long run, where should I go? Because I would always say as a first amp, get something of somewhat substantial size. You can't see these small bass amps and think, I don't know if I'm going to pick it up or after a couple of weeks get bored of it. They're amazing for traveling with or hotel rooms or if you want to play bass on the fly. But if you're serious about it and want to set a bit of time in your life to have your little cave in the house where you can sit and jam or even play watching TV, get something of substantial-ish size. And with that, a lot of amps these days do have headphone outputs. So you can plug your headphones in, it'll kill the speaker, and you can just jam by yourself. With the whole jamming thing, you will find when you start playing your bass of choice, you're going to jam with the stuff that you enjoy. You're going to be playing along to your favourite bands and you have a great time. But you're going to be playing more and more, and you will go into genres that you never thought you would, because that sounds like a cool bass line. Bruno Mars's bass players kick ass and has some of the best bass lines ever. Not the biggest Bruno Mars fan, but you will discover stuff like this. So when it comes to versatility in an amplifier, the modelling thing I mentioned earlier with lots of effects in is fantastic, but will you need distortion? Will you need clean? I don't want to do the modelling thing. I want a valve amp. A lot of amps these days do have a few things built into them, especially when it comes to the slightly smaller ones. So little Ashdowns, little Fenders, little Oranges. Distortion. They often have a little overdrive circuit. Some of the Ashdowns actually have a built-in compressor. The Black Star Unities have built-in compression, chorus, overdrive, DI out on the back, everything you kind of need in one little package. So if you want something specific, that's cool, do your thing. But if you're stressing about, do I need a certain amp for overdrive, distortion, effects, most things do have a few essential effects bass players will use already packed into the box straight from ourselves. So the big question, how much should you spend? Like I said at the start of the video, you're quite lucky. Back in the day, bass amps were, to get a good one, quite expensive, but still heavy and loud. Nowadays, you can get a loud one that sounds great quiet, is lightweight, and not a lot of money, and they look a lot sharper now as well. So with that, will you have to upgrade? If you're just starting out and you get something small and you get into it, will you have to upgrade? I'm going to go for no, unless you buy a modelling amp. I'm going to start with the modelling amp thing first, because if you're unsure, really unsure about what kind of route you want to go down, or if you like multiple genres, get the little modelling amps, because you can find they come with lots of amps built in that are modelled. You can find the amps that you enjoy and the effects you enjoy, and later on down the road, you can get those specific amps and pedals and have that as your rig and sack off the rest of the models in that amp and sell it on and trade it up. It's what you do. Or get the proper bass amp and stick with it with the DI out on the back and everything and work that way, like build a little pedal board, have all the fun like that. I will say, don't skimp though. You can get cheap amps online in certain places, like from overseas, and it'll all be a bit naff. I'd say get a brand name one, comes with a warranty, and get something of a substantial size because it'll sound good. And if it's solid state and valve, to be fair, it's hard to get bad sounding bass amps these days. They will sound good quiet, so don't worry about blowing the windows out. The headphone output is always an option as well. So get something substantial, because it'll make you want to play it more because you'll sound better. One tiny little thing before we finish as well. You can throw a spanner in the works and buy a bass pedal. So if you just want a little amp in the house and you can get the sounds that you want but don't particularly want to gig with it or carry a big bass around, there is things like Aguilar tone hammers or little Sans amps, which are essentially a bass preamp and a pedal. So your bass will go into that preamp, DI out straight into the mixing desk. There's no amps on stage, and you get your tone through the pedal, comes through the monitors, and the crowd hear it. Just an extra way of doing things. Whoops. Thought I'd let you know. So if you want to do it that way, that's an option. So many options. I hope I've kind of helped a bit to explain some, to show you it's not as intimidating as people think. I need to stop hitting these guitars. Yeah, so that's an option. What you can see as well is people building pedal boards around that. It's great for like a fly rig, or if you're on the move quite a bit, you can build a little pedal board with tuners, compressors, overdrives, choruses and everything, and have that on the end. And that is your entire rig. You haven't actually got to buy a bass amp and lug it around with you. It's all in a nice little package. So that's the little spanner in the works at the end for you there. Hope this video's kind of helped you get your head around buying your first bass amp, or just one of the tips on bass amps and how things work. It's what we're here for. It's what I try to do. And if you like this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to PMTV UK on YouTube for lots more cool bass and guitar related content. If you want any more information on anything I've yabbed on about for the past 10 minutes, go to pmtonline.co.uk or call into one of our forever expanding PMT stores. I will say, try things out before you buy them. Bass is fun to feel in person, and you'll get along with it a lot more. Or get one of our members of staff to show you how it works and us to play for you, because it can be a bit nerve-wracking playing in guitar shops. I used to hate it. We are PMT House of Rock on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. Give us a like and a follow to see pictures of these guys with cool filters on them and stuff. I've been Dagan, I'll see you next time.